Today on Beginner Fly Tying, we're tying one of my all-time favorite flies, the Parachute Adams. The materials for this fly are as follows. White UTC Ultra 140 Denier, size 12 dry fly hooks, black and white dry fly hackle, fulling mill Parapost yarn, and lastly, superfine waterproof dry fly dubbing by Wapsi. Now for the fun part, tying the fly. Lock in your size 12 dry fly hook on your vise. Pick up your white UTC Ultra 140 Denier and make thread wraps backward towards the bend of the hook. I usually stop it right at the bend of the hook. I also kind of like to put my thread over my tag end just to give that fly a little bit more bulk. When you get to the bend in the hook, sorry for fumbling over my words, cut it, and you go to your ringneck pheasant tail. I actually forgot the pheasant tail in the material list, so here is the pheasant tail right here. This is what it looks like. Comes in a big thing like that. Now, I like to pick about 3 to 5 strands off of my ringneck pheasant tail. I like to lay it down on the top of the hook like this before I give it pinch wraps, because I like to keep the tail about maybe a couple centimeters over the back of the hook. All my flies are different. So I don't have an exact measurement on how I like to have it over the hook. But I like to make 3 to 5 pinch wraps like I'm doing here. I make the wraps up back towards the eye of the hook. Take the excess pheasant tail, cut it, and then we go to our Wapsi fine dubbing after I give one more pinch wrap here. Boom, here we go, dubbing. Here I believe I am using the mahogany one. I do all of my Parachute Adams in different colors. Sometimes the fish just like to have a different presentation. But back to the fly. Go put a dubbing noodle on your thread, like so. I say it in all my videos where I'm doing a dubbing noodle. If it gets tough, wet your fingers a little bit and then spin that dubbing on, and it makes it a whole lot easier to spin it down. Once I get my dubbing noodle spun down onto my thread, I make thread wraps back towards the eye of the hook, like I'm doing here. I make them back until I get a quarter of the way up the hook to halfway up the hook, sometimes a little more. Our next step, we grab our Parapost yarn, give it 1, 2, 3 wraps to secure it on the hook. And I like to pull it up and measure it out. Doesn't really matter if you do that or not, because at the end of the video, you end up trimming the Parapost yarn anyway. And then I give it about 2 to 3 more wraps, and then I start making my wraps around the Parapost yarn. This is a little bit tricky, but I give it 3 to 5 wraps at the base, and then I give it 2 more or 3 more wraps up the Parapost just to lock it down better. And it is so hard. Sometimes that'll end up all over the place. Lock it down with 1 more wrap, and then pull it down a little bit, and then I grab a little bit more of that dry fly dubbing, and then I put a little bit of it over that eye of the hook. Just a little bit, especially in this case scenario here where I maybe put that Parapost a little too close to the eye of the hook. It still works, but I wanted to have that Parapost a little farther back on this fly, a little bit farther back. This next step might be something I do and nobody else does, but I like to take the excess dubbing that I have on my noodle, and I like to give it a couple more wraps in front and a couple more wraps behind to secure down that parapost. Now we grab our dry fly hackle, pick off a few strands of the hackle itself, and expose the stem of the dry fly hackle. After that, you take it. I decided to wrap this one in at the base of the parapost. I then align it with the parapost and start wrapping around the hackle and the parapost itself. I give it 2 to 3 wraps. After that, cut the little bit of stem left on it and begin wrapping that dry fly hackle around the base of the parapost. I try and wrap it as close and as tight to the parapost as I can, and I try and leave as little tag end on that dry fly hackle as I possibly can. Just makes that fly look a lot better. And at the bottom here, I wrap around the base one more time, and then I wrap down to that tag end. And then I snip as close to the hook as I can, just so there's nothing hanging off of it. As we get closer to the end of the fly, I like to pull back the parapost yarn and the dry fly hackle and make my last few turns around the eye of the hook, like so. Lastly, pull out enough thread that you can get your whip finish tool in there, grab it, and give 1, 2 wraps, take it out, pull it down, and then I like to give it a snip, and then I go up to the parapost yarn, twist it around a little bit, and then I give it a snip a little ways up there. I cut that a little bit too short. I want to have that a little bit higher. But that about wraps it up. That's the Parachute Adams. Don't really know what I was thinking there, thinking that was going to focus that fast. But as always, thank you guys for watching and supporting. Don't forget to like and subscribe.